Imagine staggering home from the fields with your arm split open, and the village matron fixes you by melting sheep fat into the flesh and stitching it shut with horsehair. No surgeon, no prayers for quick death, just whatever was lying around the cottage fire. Stick around, because medieval peasants turned kitchens, barns, and churchyards into emergency rooms that make modern horror films look tame. They poured undiluted wine straight into bone-deep head wounds because water was for livestock and wine, at least, smelled faintly of salvation. The burn was immediate, cleansing by agony, but everyone swore the sting chased out evil vapors before infection set in. If the patient still thrashed, 2 neighbors pinned him, while a third recited the Lord's Prayer backward, an improvised exorcism of pus performed between mouthfuls of barley ale. Nobody pretended this was gentle. Survival was the only applause that mattered. When the cellar ran dry, cobwebs stepped up. Yes, actual spider silk scraped from church rafters, rolled between soot-black fingers, then slapped onto gashes like some 8-legged gauze. Peasants claimed the threads sucked the rot, and disturbingly, they weren't entirely wrong. Spider silk's mild antiseptic quality joined forces with faith and desperation. Of course, they didn't stop there. A dab of warm candle wax sealed the silk in place, leaving the unlucky soul looking as though he'd been gift-wrapped by a particularly vengeful spider. Dung poultices followed, because naturally the thing oozing behind the cow looked medicinal after a quick stir with wild thyme. Fresh was forbidden, too hot, too foul, so they insisted on well-aged droppings, which is medieval for already buzzing with flies. Spread onto linen scraps tied over arrow slits and left to ferment against living skin, the mixture generated a heat peasants believed drew poison outward. Some did heal, others reenacted slow, feverish death scenes, while the village priest muttered that God must have a plan involving pus. Sweet relief arrived in sticky amber form. Honey, especially the thick, half-crystallized swill scraped from forgotten combs, became salvation in a jar. They'd mash snails into the honey, swearing by Saint Blais that mollusk slime softened hard flesh, then drizzle the concoction into spear holes. It was messy, it was revolting, but the sugar starved bacteria, and the slime kept the dressing moist. When a wound finally scabbed, the healer rubbed a final layer across the scar so the devil couldn't read the seam. Medieval cybersecurity, if you will. For injuries that wouldn't stop bleeding, subtlety caught fire, literally. A red-hot plowshare, fresh from the forge, pressed against torn flesh until sizzling quiet replaced arterial spray. The smell? Bacon gone wrong. The sound? A hiss that silenced the entire hamlet faster than any sermon. Cautery wasn't a last resort, it was Tuesday. Afterwards, they daubed the char with rendered lard and wrapped it in wool, confident that sheep were holy creatures and their fat, therefore, blessed. Nothing says devotion like branding your neighbor with farm equipment. Yet amid the carnage, there was botany. Wise women with pockets full of yarrow, plantain, and comfrey stalks stalked the lanes, muttering dosage in half-remembered Latin. They crushed leaves between rocks, spat into the pulp, yes, saliva as solvent, and packed the green grime into cuts. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the patient claimed to see angels, which the healer took as payment in testimonials. One dry-voiced matron quipped that if the plants failed, at least the grave would smell of herbs. Gallows humor kept everyone's sanity limping along. Spiritual insurance policy, relics, a splinter of St. Cuthbert's staff, a fragment of St. Agnes's veil, or any suspiciously generic bone labeled apostolic would be laid across the bandage. The logic was simple. Saints had already died spectacularly, so they surely understood trauma. Pilgrims limped miles to borrow holiness like a cosmic loan, and if confession couldn't seal the wound, maybe the saint's tax-exempt body part would. When miracles didn't manifest, parishioners shrugged. Clearly, the sufferer harbored secret sin. Accountability culture, 14th century style. Canine therapy came next because, of course, peasants noticed dogs lick their own wounds and live. A half-starved mastiff was encouraged to lap at a farmer's infected leg. Saliva enzymes offered mild antiseptic action, but mostly it was a cheap distraction. While everyone cooed at the dog, the healer slipped a knife under blackened flesh and sliced away putrefaction. If patient or dog growled, more ale. By nightfall, both lay snoring in straw, equally oblivious to medical ethics. When even dogs lost interest, urine volunteered. Morning water, preferably from a healthy child, was mixed with coarse salt and poured over the injury. The sting was biblical, the smell unforgettable. But ammonia did what it could. Villagers declared the cure strongest on Mondays, proving that pseudoscience loves a calendar. If the wound still reeked by Wednesday, everything was repeated, only louder, with extra salt for stubborn demons. Medieval medicine believed in escalation before innovation. Maggots, the cleanup crew nobody ordered, slid into the story next. Peasants noticed soldiers with worm-ridden wounds sometimes survived when cleaner corpses did not. So they gathered fly-blown meat scraps, harvested the squirming larvae, and sprinkled them like grisly confetti into necrotic tissue. The maggots feasted only on dead flesh, leaving pink islands of hope beneath their banquet. Watching them work required a stomach forged in plague years, but when the worms fattened and were brushed away, survivors called the sight skin reborn. Renaissance dermatology wishes it had that brand loyalty. Every so often, a traveling barber surgeon clattered through, blades jangling like a macabre tambourine. He'd shave beards in the morning and amputate gangrenous toes by dusk, charging 1 coin either way, because steady hands were a flat-rate luxury. Peasants memorized his techniques, mostly speed over precision, and practiced on pigs once he left. Rags boiled in harsh lye for laundry doubled as bandages, the caustic residue offering accidental disinfection. If the cloth dissolved skin, they called it divine pruning and thanked Providence for clean margins. And then, the quiet aftermath. Villagers gathering around a smoky hearth, retelling survival sagas while the patient displayed a limb that looked hammered together by drunken blacksmiths. Scars became social capital. A man whose thigh bore roast mark spiral score reached marriageable status faster than a dowry cow. Proof he could face death and still harvest grain. In a world without surgeons, endurance wrote its own resume. The community's brutal creativity, spider silk, dung poultice, molten metal, wasn't madness. It was the improvisation of people who refused to let distance, poverty, or class decide whether a body kept breathing. Fast forward to your brightly lit pharmacy aisle, each bottle promising sterilized miracles. Somewhere between the antiseptic wipes and butterfly stitches sits the ghost of a peasant woman, spooning honey over a spear hole, muttering that bees at least don't charge consultation fees. Her methods were crude, her success inconsistent, yet her legacy sticks like cobweb gauze. When resources vanish, ingenuity oozes in to fill the gap. Modern medicine wears lab coats and wields lasers, but should civilization hiccup, it'll be back to kitchens, barns, and whatever's bubbling in the cauldron. Because flesh hasn't changed, and neither has humanity's stubborn instinct to keep it stitched together with whatever's at hand.